Look, before I start, I'd really like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people and to acknowledge elders past and present. I think what Hetty was saying earlier about the importance of acknowledging country is something it's just going to come up about 100 times throughout my talk, really, because I'm really looking at that nexus of how cultural narratives can intersect with design to create a more meaningful world and to connect us all. First thing I'd like to sort of just say is that Australian design is over 40,000 years old. If you look at the design of the boomerang or the design of the woomera or the design of this beautiful shield, which is from WA here, there are some really beautiful principles that sit behind this Australian design, and they are objects of sophisticated function. They're absolutely beautiful. They're highly sustainable in that they're, made of readily made materials, and they help you live sustainably within the world. But they also have a story to them as well. And that story may be something that's carved into the object, it may be something that's painted into the object, but it goes further than that. Objects are actually injected with life stories. So in the Aboriginal worldview, and this was described to me by a senior Indigenous advisor to the director of the National Museum of Australia, that says that in the Aboriginal worldview, everything is living, even objects are living, and that it is injected with the ancestors that have come before. So the maker or the artist is just a channel of which the ancestors are coming through, and that life force is injected into the object. I like this. I really like this concept, because she also goes further and says that when that object becomes part of ceremony, that object becomes completely vitalised, that object becomes completely alive. So can we start to think about the built environment in the same way? Can we start to think about the buildings that we walk through, this material world? Can we start to think about objects as living entities that are injected with this life force? I would say yes. And I would say that we can start to think about the built environment and think about objects as mediums for cultural narratives to come through, for these stories to come through. Storytelling, and why is that? Why should they be a new medium for these stories to come through? Is because storytelling is vital to life. And in Aboriginal culture, I think anyone who's, trying to be a good human on the planet would agree to that it's absolutely vital to us living. Art is not a nice to have, it's a must have. And in our culture, art has two functions. Art is about revealing our cultural values, and it's about showing them to young people, teaching young people how to live in the world. And what are our cultural values? Well, Aboriginal cultural values are about country, connection to country. In your world, that may mean sustainability and living sustainably with the planet. In the Aboriginal worldview, it is about the connectedness between all things, the sea, the star, the skies, water, land, all of it. And it's also our culture is about, and our cultural values are about kinship and the importance of family and the importance of nurturing our elders and our young. And that relationship between the elders and the young is incredibly important. So we will never farm, our elders off into, just aged care facilities with no recognition. What we're about is about drawing on the wisdom of elders, teaching it to young people, and we take that responsibility very, very seriously. So that they're important cultural values, and also the fact that we value storytelling as well as a means for all of that to occur, and that our culture is living, so that it's not just about, putting our culture in a showcase, and, we go to museums and we refer to it. We have to keep writing new legends. We have to keep working with, elders to write new stories and tell them in new languages through hip-hop, through music, through the built environment. Otherwise, if we call ourselves, very proudly the world's oldest living culture, and the word living is the most important part of that. But it's also about human connection. We heard in Timo's talk about, us all getting together and strengthening our relationships. And to do this, we need a new way of working. And this diagram was actually drawn to me by an Aboriginal educator many years ago when I was at university, because he was talking about the Aboriginal Indigenous ways of learning and knowing, and how it is different to the Western way. And he described it to me in terms of making bread. And he said, well, you can always do it the Western way, grab a recipe, get some yeast, get some flour, and follow the recipe and make a perfectly good loaf of bread. And that's what I think that straight line from A to B is all about. But in the Indigenous way, it's actually the jokes and the stories that you tell and the relationships that you forge while you're making the bread with others. That is what we place the value in. I think that's what Peter's, presentation was really all about. But, what's got me thinking about what Theasta was saying this morning was that maybe there is no B. Maybe we make pizza with the ingredients. Maybe we don't know what the outcome is. We don't have to make bread. We could make something else. We could burn the bread, really. It doesn't really matter, because we've come out of it with a deeper connection, a deeper relationship with learnings, and we will get somewhere at some stage. And, you can actually apply that to your creative process. You can apply that to a major development, but there will be it's a meandering line. So there are other places that you will go along the process that are incredibly important to go to and that must be a part of a project. And, those parts, I would say, have to come in right at day one. And I'll talk more about that later, because they are little bees in themselves, all of those little peaks and troughs within that process, that there are outcomes that become the legacy of the projects. I want to talk a little bit with my brother from another mother, Kevin O'Brien. His project, Sepyama, which he presented at the 2012 Venice Biennale for Architecture. And it's the idea that country, and he describes country as an Aboriginal idea. He says that every moment within the land, the sea and the sky, and its particles and its prompts and its potential enables life. And it is only revealed to you by camping in it, by spending time in it. That is his way to architecture, and that's his way to understanding what belonging really means. And I think about this and I think, well, how, if I'm working at the moment, I'm working with the Barangaroo Development Authority and we're doing a really big development in Sydney, do we all take the Development Authority down to that land and we all camp together? Do we take the architects down there and we camp together? Do we take the artists down there and we camp together? And the answer is yes. Day one of the project is we all go down there and we just stay there. We sleep there and we feel the land and we feel what it's like there. And we allow that land to speak to us and to talk to us. I like that. I think that's quite out there. I think that's quite a transformational concept. But I think we need to actually really start thinking about day one of the project. What are we doing on day one? Barangaroo is interesting in that, they are actually, creating a committee that's made up of traditional owners that answers directly to the CEO of the Development Authority. That is actually quite transformational, really. And that, people like Hetty and I are involved throughout the process of the development. The development itself is named after an incredible Aboriginal woman that I'll talk about later. I want to talk about two very tangible ways that I think that we can start to bring cultural narratives into our projects. One of them, and this is one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, I've been thinking about what to do on day one of a project. And I've come to the conclusion that I'd like to be in the space of writing the brief. I just want to write the brief. And this is really to, engage, and I would like to work with artists and elders to write the brief. So picture it, we're all camping together, we're around the campfire, and we're going to write the brief for the project together. And this is actually, I will do it in the form of film, because I believe that not only will you be, to set the cultural values for the project in a beautiful way, but you're recognising the elders, you're creating a legacy, and you're also using that urban development to play a role, and as it should play a role in cultural maintenance. So those films are there forever. Those films are there as a legacy. Those films live on. And also place-based design, which I won't go into in huge amounts of detail, other than to say that I think it can be a vehicle for cultural sustainability and also economic independence for our people, and I'll get to that. So the place-based films are something that I'm just starting to get into now, working with an amazing cinematographer, Nick Lakashak, and we're looking at, really capturing the elders in a cinematic sort of a style, and that those films, they might only be 3 minutes, and it might be about the history of the site, the significance of the site, it might be about the importance of women. In the case of the video that I'm going to show you, it's about how we actually need to take our shoes off and love one another more and walk the land. But that those films, and you might have a collection of 5 or 6 of them, that they are given to every architect, every designer, every artist that works on the project. And it might just be, they might not use any of those values or any of the words that they hear within that, but they understand that that is the cultural framework for the entire project, that these are the beliefs that follow through the whole project. I'll just play Uncle Larry Kelly from Nembaka for you.
Being connected spiritually and culturally is very, very important. Reconnecting with our culture and life and spirituality is just part of our journey in life through our connection with the land. It is healthy for their well-being to understand that they receive that energy from the land. Ayam Barawai Birigan Wajar. Barawai Wajar is big land. For people to connect with country and for their health reasons and for healing purposes, they have to connect with country, and the only way that they could connect with country is to walk on the land and stand with their bare feet and feel the energy from Mother Earth that creates the energy to come up through the earth and through your body, so that you realize who you are and where you are, and give you self-respect and dignity as an Aboriginal person. Aboriginal people need more respect for themselves and more love, and to share with their cultural belief in Birigan, our creator, and pass all that love around as much as they can. We have to do that because that's a legacy that was left to us by our ancestors, my grandfathers and my fathers and uncles. The spirit is unbreakable because it's a gift of life.
So, very simple and powerful. And I think it's in a language that is not only easy for everybody to understand, but, you know, is there as a form of cultural maintenance. So why can't, you know, these huge developments that have huge amounts of money attached to them do that on day one? They're about creating a new type of briefing to define the values. They're about the story of country. They're about meaningful engagement, recognising the elders, and, as I said, you know, cultural maintenance, not just being left to small Aboriginal organisations that are under-resourced and arts organisations, but actually the big end of town playing a role in that. I'd like to talk a little bit about place-based design. I've worked in this space for 15 years or longer, I think. You know, and in that we've done in various mediums. This is Wilcannia Hospital. You know, architecture, it is a really wonderful medium for place-based design. In this process, again, we talked to the elders on day one. They were involved all the way throughout the process. And so this design actually tells a traditional story of Party, the river cod. And so when we spoke to the community about this building, it wasn't talking about walls and roofs and windows. We talked about skins and fins and gills, and this building became a living, breathing, living entity. And, you know, it was built by the community as well. They started an earth brick company that the building was actually made out of. And so we were able, through a $3 million building process, support a social enterprise. Also with public art, you know, in this project, which is in, just south of Sydney, in my traditional country, I worked with Aboriginal women to mark a site, an Aboriginal traditional women's site, but also to heal a massacre site. We collected wood from the area. It tells the story of the 6 daughters of the West Wind, which was also close to my heart because I'm from a family of 6 daughters. So I made my one the most perfect one. But we collected wood from the site and we stacked, and I actually made it with my sister as well, which was really, she tried to make hers the most perfect, but anyway, whatever. We individually cast each of those sticks in bronze, and we made that work over a process of 9 months. And now, as one of the aunties says from there, that they have become part of the mountain forever. And I think that that is really important for work to acknowledge that you're marking site and you're also healing sites. You know, that history is really important. You know, the week before we started that project, you know, a woman had actually, you know, committed suicide with her son. She jumped off the cliff of the mountain, you know, and you can't ignore those stories. Those stories become part of the work. I want to talk about collaboration. We've all talked about collaboration, and yes, it does, working with artists does help to embed meaning into the project, and it is very important because of their sensibilities. They bring that to projects. But I want to also say that it's a chance for, you know, large-scale developments to engage with the little guy. You know, all of these artists here, they're all sole traders, you know, and you know, a small commission from them is just a massive difference in their lives. You know, I want to talk about the guy up in the top left-hand corner, Brenton Lugnan, that I worked with. You know, he's a single dad with a 10-year-old daughter. He's an amazing artist. And he, I said to him, I was approached by Westpac, which was one of the big tenants at Barangaroo, and they wanted to do some custom rugs and some textiles for their fit out. And, it was a $60,000 project, for us, which, really, this is a guy who's, on a disability pension. That's a huge commission for a guy like him, and now his 10-year-old daughter can run through, one of his designs is actually going to be on a, 7-metre wall, on 7 stories, and he tells the story of the hunting of the site as well. So it's created a deeper level of meaning, within those interiors for Westpac. And, economic independence for Aboriginal people is social justice. As soon as we can say we're employed, and when we say we're employed, it really only means for a lot of artists living in regional New South Wales, it'll mean $30,000. Thanks, that's enough. So I think we've got to really start thinking about innovative ways in which to give, employment, but not the traditional sense, but really creating micro jobs within these large-scale developments. And I work, I created this lounge room called, and we didn't even want to call it the lounge room, we call it the sit place, because it's a place of contemplation and reflection, And I worked with an Aboriginal elder who's a poet, and I worked with 3 different artists, and I worked with furniture makers, and I worked with lace makers in Scotland. So it starts to, to create this space. You see the design actually becomes more like a curator, somebody who just brings people together, and we go, all right, well, what are we going to do? So with this, and lighting designers as well, I might just add. And so what we created was, a space and, furniture. I can't really go into it at all, but just to say that, that this lace that was created is Brenton's design, and it talks about kinship. It's their actual seed pods, and it's all about your lineage. And there are 3 poems that were created by Auntie B. Ballingarry that go with this work. So this sit place is actually touring around the country at the moment, and you can sit in the chair and actually listen to her reading the poetry. So I'm really interested in that, and perhaps one day I'd love for you to be able to roll your smartphone over some of these designs and, those films come back to you. And so I think that's where, the digital world and, I would like the environment to literally speak to you. I think that's really when we'll start to do some exciting things. And the lace makers in Scotland, they were fantastic, and, working with them was really amazing. And the furniture makers, they collected, it's what Theasta was saying about how materials actually have stories as well. And so, it becomes layered with meaning. And I just want to say that, I'm working at the moment with a private developer called Litis Group, who are doing a cultural precinct out at Parramatta in Western Sydney. And, I think they must have read something that I wrote somewhere and, rang me up and just said, look, we're really interested in this idea and working with them. And it's really good that we're working, again, early in the process, because, we're starting to look at opportunities for us to embed cultural narrative into every aspect of the development. There's a conference centre, there might be a hotel, so we're looking at an Aboriginal art hotel, etc., etc. But what I think is innovative about this and what I would really like to achieve with this project is that the built environment becomes a retail outlet for all of those products, so that what you see around you, the cups you drink out of, the chairs you sit on, the light you turn on, the clock that you read, those things you can actually buy. And so that's when, and that money goes back to those small creators that have made those things, so that we start to rejuvenate local manufacturing, small businesses, again, those micro jobs, and that these large spaces can actually, you know, you don't have to go to a gallery shop to buy this stuff, that the environments that we are creating become the retail outlets for those objects and start to support small business. The only thing I really want to finish on now is just to say, look, I'm early, which is good, but just to say that, you know, I talk about social justice, I talk about cultural narrative, I talk about cultural values, I talk about the connectedness of all of us, you know, as Aboriginal ideas, but really we all know that Indigenous people just know how to be human a lot better than the Western world. So we should just, you know, learn from that and, you know, and I certainly do, and I just feel absolutely blessed to be an Aboriginal woman. And, you know, Aidan Ridgway always says too that, you know, when Australians can look themselves in the mirror and say and find their own Aboriginality, that's when we'll have truly matured as a nation. And I think, yeah, that's a beautiful way to finish. Thanks.